Well, it's now time for the Prep Spotlight presented by Capital Sports Fieldhouse. Our special guest this evening, Brian Calloway of the Lansing State Journal. He does an outstanding job on prep coverage, and really that's what we're all about here, even though we do Michigan and Michigan State and the Lions, but high school sports, it's what it's all about. So thanks for joining us, Brian. And, we want to talk to you a little bit about the Lansing area. But before we do, give us a little bio on yourself. What sent you over to Lansing to cover sports?
Yeah, so I went to college at Eastern Michigan. Got done there about 2005 and was down in Adrian actually for about 5 or 6 years before making the trek up to Lansing. When I started in Lansing, kind of doing some behind the scenes stuff before I really started really digging in on some prep stuff, and I did some Michigan State stuff prior to going full fledged on preps. But yeah, I've been doing preps in Lansing probably for about 7 or 8 years now. So it's kind of crazy to think it's been that long for sure.
I mean, how do you think Ted feels? You've been doing it for how long, Ted?
37 years. I love it still.
Yeah. Brian, I want to ask you in our prep spotlight, I do this to every guest we have, the media members who cover the sport. The three of us are Corunna Cavalier alums. They're in D5 this year, so I've got to ask. D5, what teams are you looking at that would potentially be, hurdles for Corunna in the playoffs? Are we thinking Portland? Is that probably the biggest one in the Lansing area?
I think Portland is the one that immediately jumps out at me as far as in Greater Lansing. I mean, Greater Lansing's kind of got a nice little staple of D5 teams. You look at Portland, and obviously with what they've done and winning the CAAC White once again, and they just went up to Cadillac and got a win on Friday, which that was a pretty big win because Cadillac is a team that would just have climbed in the top 10 in Division III. So, Portland went toe to toe with DeWitt. I don't think DeWitt is the team that we've seen over the past few years, but DeWitt is still DeWitt. So they went toe to toe with DeWitt and lost the game in the last seconds there. But then you also kind of look at some of the other teams. Williamston is a team that is kind of intriguing just because of their quarterback Alex Petersburg, who's a kind of a dual threat guy, and he just led them to a big win over Olivet. And Olivet is a team that was playing well and had just climbed into the top 10 in Division 5. And then I mentioned Olivet. I mean, they're a team that had has made some strides recently. I mean, they lost their season opener to Charlotte, but they've been pretty strong since, other than that hiccup against Williamston last week. So I think when you're looking at our area, I think Portland is kind of the team in Division 5 that would probably kind of pose the biggest challenge to Corunna. But I mean, with what Corunna's done this year, I mean, that's been pretty outstanding with what they've done. I know they lost quite a bit from that team last year that made it to the regional, and then for them to be 7-1, right now, I mean, it's pretty good season for them.
The big name that I feel like I hear all the time in the Lansing area in terms of a stud player is Evan Boyd. We know how good he is, committed to Central Michigan, wide receiver from East Lansing. Who's another player or two that you think maybe it doesn't get as much pub as Evan Boyd, but a star in the high school ranks?
I think if you're kind of looking at some stars, I mean, I think Mason has got some players that are a little bit under the radar with what they've been doing. And, Mason's the only team in the Greater Lansing that's still unbeaten, 8-0 heading into a Week 9 contest against Eden Rapids. And they have a sophomore quarterback that's put up some pretty big numbers. Kason Carswell, over 1,000 yards passing, has got 22 touchdowns, I believe, which is a school record. He just threw for 313 yards last week in a win over Jackson as well, too, which is just shy of a single game school record. And he's had some pretty nice performances for them. And like I said, he's only a sophomore. So, I mean, I think he's one of those guys. I mean, DeWitt's got a lineman, Matthew Neff, who's going to Central Michigan as well, too. And obviously with kind of the position that he plays, you don't necessarily get as much pub as someone like an Evan Boyd. And East Lansing, you even look at Evan Boyd's teammate, Dorian Jackson. He's a guy that committed to Grand Valley before the start of the season. And he's a kind of a guy on the opposite side that can make some big plays for them. So those are some of the few. I mean, even Nakia Makri from Hazlitt is an intriguing guy, is a running back and a dangerous kick returner. I mean, he opened his season by returning a couple of kicks for scores against DeWitt. And, and he's a very shifty running back. Guys, people don't kick to him at all as well, too. And he's just a fun guy to watch play as well, too. So I think those are maybe some of the other names to kind of think about when you're kind of looking at some of the talent in the Lansing area for sure.
There was one I was going to ask you about that you didn't mention there. I don't know if you were at the DeWitt Grand Ledge game, but the kid for Grand Ledge, Sean Foster, ripped off 400 yards and 7 touchdowns in a 56-49 win over the Panthers. I mean, that's a game for all time. Were you there, and what do you think of Sean Foster?
No, I was not at that game. Actually, I was at the Portland-Charlotte game that day. But, Sean Foster is a guy, he comes from good lineage. Obviously, his dad was a high school star at Lansing Sexton and, went on to play at Michigan State. And, and this Sean Foster, his son, I mean, quite a performance and quite the year that he's having. I mean, he's a guy that hadn't played quarterback since 5th grade. They slide him in at quarterback this year. And, obviously, it's a little bit of adjustment when you're, getting back into a position that you haven't played. But, I mean, he's just been outstanding for them this year. They, seven touchdowns in that game against DeWitt, 396 yards, scores the game-winning touchdown with 51 seconds left as well, too. And, he's just had a heck of a senior season. And I'm actually going to get a chance to see him play for the first time this year on Friday because they have East Lansing in a pretty big game that will decide who shares the CAAC Blue title with Holt. But no, yeah, he's definitely one of those guys as well too that will jump out at you too with just what he's done as a senior, especially playing quarterback for them. And he's also headed to Grand Valley to play football as well.
Yeah, I was going to tell Matt and Jared they'll be happy about that.
Yeah. Go Lakers! Yeah, Grand Valley just picked up a big W over Ferris, right?
Yeah, anchor bone, baby.
That's right. I want to ask you. So you when we were talking about Corona, you kind of said not necessarily a surprise year for them, but like coming off of last year, big season so far for them. Any schools in the Lansing area that either way are a surprise? You thought they were going to be really good and they're down, or maybe a team that you didn't expect to have a great season and they're looking really good. Any teams that stick out to you?
I think the one that jumps out is Lansing Catholic. That's kind of been the big name around here for so many years. Or a team that just won a state championship last year, had won 2 state championships in the last 3 years. And, for them, just to be, hanging by their pins and needles, just trying to get into the playoffs. I mean, they're only 3-5 now. They just got a big win last week over Fowlerville, but no, I definitely did not see them being a team that's, under 500 just based on, what they've been able to do since really 2008 when Jim Ahern took over, and shortly after Jim Ahern took over that program. So for them to, kind of be struggling this year was something I didn't expect at all. Mm-hmm. I think Lansing Waverly has been one of the good stories around here as well, too. I mean, they're a team that been, has, not had a lot of success recently. They won their first 4 games of the season, or I think it was, 3 of their first – actually, it was 3 of their first 4 games of the season they won. They're 4-4 right now. They're in position to make the playoffs, although they have a big game this week against DeWitt. So I think they've been a good story as well, too, just because they haven't had as much success recently. And they had a new coach, D.A.I. Jones, took over that program, and he's been able to, get them to play respectable football and actually be in contention to make the playoffs, which is something that hasn't been said about Lansing Waverly football in some time. And Portland St. Patrick is an 8-player team that has been a powerhouse in Greater Lansing for some time, and they're sitting at 3-5 as well too. So definitely did not see that happening as well too, considering all the success that they've had and the deep runs that they've been able to make in 8-player football in recent years.
I want to ask you about a kid who actually isn't in high school anymore, but he's in college, and we've been lucky enough to be able to watch him on Saturdays. That's Andrew Anthony, former East Lansing wide receiver. I know you wrote.
He needs to get more playing time, right?
In the day. We love watching him. We've kind of been wondering where he's been at this year, but it's just such a stacked receiver room that he hasn't been on the field as much, or hasn't popped off the screen like he did against East Lansing last year. What do you remember about him, and what type of kid was he?
Oh, Andrew was a great kid. He's one of my favorite guys to cover. Actually, when he was going through the recruiting process a little bit, he did a little bit of a recruiting diary for us. So he would of update things from time to time, and tell us what was going on with him, and kind of giving us like a inside scoop for him to provide his perspective on the process as well too. But I just remember him just kind of being this very, very nice kid, very humble kid, but also just such a standout guy on the field, and just with all the plays that he was able to make for East Lansing. And like you said, I mean, from watching football on Saturdays, you're like, yeah, when's he going to get the ball more? When's he going to be in the field more? It's kind of been tough for him to be out there, kind of with the stacked receiver room that Michigan has had. But he really, with the performance he had, last year in East Lansing, he really thought that that's going to be a sign of some things to come for him in that Michigan football program. And hey, I think he could still do some things there for sure.
Yeah.
And maybe to your point, you mentioned how his character and good kid, at least from what we see, he doesn't seem to be complaining about playing time or touches or anything like that. So it is cool.
Yeah, and he didn't ever seem to be like that kind of kid where, it's kind of all about him. Sometimes you see those kids that are there and, they want the immediate, they got to be on the field immediately. And, if it doesn't work out that way, it's like, hey, I got to enter the transfer portal or things like that. But he never kind of, gave that vibe to me from, times when I was covering him as one of those kids that was going to jump ship if, he wasn't getting the playing time immediately and whatnot. And, I think Michigan kind of was a dream scenario for him as well, too. I remember from him in high school, his dad was a big Michigan fan and would always be watching Michigan games a lot, and I think his mom was actually a Michigan State grad, so a little bit of a house divided there. But I mean, I think the appeal. I mean, I think his dad, being a big Michigan fan, I think he just kind of really relishes being able to watch his son play and run onto the big house field every Saturday.
Yep.
Brian, things have changed a lot from when I started out, especially in the newspaper business. You've been in the business now 10, 15 years, whatever it is. What have you seen the biggest challenge for the newspaper business in general? I mean, it seems like everything's going to social media nowadays. Obviously, the online editions are really where most people are getting their news from. Are you finding that a hindrance, or you just adjusting to it and growing with it?
You always just have to adjust to it and grow with it. And I just remember when I started in the industry, Twitter wasn't even a thing yet. And online wasn't even that big of a presence then. I mean, I know when I worked in Adrian, I remember we had an online website, but it was like, you posted stuff later in the day, and it wasn't the first place that people were getting their news. They were more so picking up the paper and getting their news. But, now it's just big online, and people don't pick up the paper as much. I don't mind it as well too, just because of the instantaneous thing, being able to update things quickly. If you do happen to make a mistake, being able to fix that and update that quickly as well too. So, I mean, I think there's some very good things about it. And there's also some bad things about it as well too, just because of the time demands and, being in the news industry is almost like a 24/7 cycle. You always got to be kind of on and, kind of knowing what's going on as well too. Just because, you never know when something can break, and then, it can kind of adjust your day and whatnot as well too. But, I kind of enjoy kind of, the social media atmosphere of it and just being able to, access things quickly and connect with people as well too. Just being able to connect with athletes via social media, whether it's Twitter or Instagram and things like that. And, I think it's a unique opportunity for someone that's a journalist, to kind of build your own brand as well too via social media. I mean, it's almost like what you guys have with your pod as well too, and being able to kind of build a brand through social media and reach people that you may not be able to reach just by advertising. Like, oh, hey, we have this podcast, let's put it in the newspaper and hope someone listens to it. I mean, I think just the power of social media, you can reach so many more people and get some of your content have eyes on so many more people that you can reach just through basically a basic newspaper that has a circulation that's only spread out around a certain area.
Sure.
I'm just a media peon, so this probably doesn't mean much, but I think you're a great writer. I love reading your writing. I always have, even when I was in high school. At M Live, you always have great stuff. Or not, excuse me, not M Live, but not that. But anyway, still, Lansing State Journal. I love your writing, but you've been doing this like 15 years, like Ted said. What's some of your favorite stories that you've done over the years?
I think there's some of those stories where you can kind of document, stories about athletes and, overcoming tragedy and things and the different unique stories and circumstances, that they face. I think those are the ones that always kind of stand out at you, as well as maybe some like special projects and things that you can work on. I'm kind of a big baseball junkie, so sometimes I enjoy some of the bigger pieces that I've done baseball wise on the Lansing Lugnuts and kind of like, the impact that they've had on downtown Lansing and whatnot. But, there's also some, high school stories and things like that, and things that you've been able to cover from a high school perspective that, kind of jump out at you as well too, or athletes that you cover as well too. Like, we talked about Andrew Anthony earlier. I mean, that was, being able to cover him was awesome. Brandon Johns was another guy that was at East Lansing that was at Michigan. And, I got to cover him throughout his entire high school career. So I think, being able to follow some of these standout athletes as they kind of progress through high school, and then see them be able to reach their dreams and earn the Division I scholarships is very fun to do. And also seeing teams reach the top of the mountaintop, when the team wins a state championship and you're able to follow their run, and you see them actually do it, especially Ford's Field, or the Breslin Center when they do it as well too. I mean, those are just kind of exciting moments, and those things that you kind of they energize you as well too, because especially basketball. I mean, basketball can be a long season; it can be a grind, and from going from late November and December until late March, and it can kind of wear you down a little bit. But I think once you get to March Madness and basketball season, then all of a sudden you got that energy going again, and seeing teams go on runs, and just the atmosphere at games just kind of gives you that energy and gets you excited about what you're doing.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you there. It is a grind, but when it's capped off at a weekend at Breslin, that's kind of nice. It's a good setup. Final question for you, Brian. If you look at all the sports you cover, are you like us? This is the time of year. Football really is the king, or is there another sport that you like to follow better?
No, I think football. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm a baseball junkie, but there's nothing like high school football. Yeah. Just like the week-to-week thing and being able to set up things, and it's my favorite sport to cover from a high school perspective. And the audience is there too. The community is there. I mean, people love to rally around the high school football game, and you see they get to take in the atmosphere from the stands whenever you're at a game as well too. So I just really enjoy football season and kind of following the week-to-week progression of things. And I like too that it's kind of once a week thing, so you're able to kind of set things up from time to time and kind of look ahead to big games. I mean, it's so hard to do that with all the other sports, especially basketball when they're playing 2-3 times a week, where it's kind of hard to kind of set things up from that perspective, just because it's bang bang bang. But football's that unique sport where it's kind of the once a week kind of thing, and you can set up big games, and you can kind of just the atmosphere that surrounds football games as well too. I mean, they're community events, and football is kind of what drives the boat for a lot of schools for sure.
Especially when those Friday night lights, especially when you've been in a community, you've been in the Lansing area now for a while, you're getting pretty well plugged in. Us growing up in Corona, the Durand story this year is really cool. We had their head coach on a couple weeks ago, and seeing them beat New Lothrop and win their first league title in like 30-40 years, those are the kind of stories that you get those in basketball and other sports. But I don't know, maybe it's because we love football. It seems like they're just very different in high school football.
No, yeah, they definitely are. And like you said, I mean, I was kind of following along that Durand New Lothrop game as well too, because it had big implications for Ovid Elsie, which is part of our coverage area as well too. And if New Lothrop would have pulled off the win, that could have ended that league could have ended in a three-way tie as well too. So I mean, that was kind of an exciting game to follow, just kind of the high stakes, and obviously New Lothrop, and they've had so much success over the years. So, but hats off to Durand and what they've been able to do, and it's really started when they beat Langsburg. With a nice little win in week one, and Langsburg's been a pretty good team this year. Hasn't lost since falling in week 2 to Pewamo, Westphalia, and won a share of a league title as well too. So what Durand has done has been very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great stuff here, Brian. We do appreciate it. We also appreciate you being a charter member of the 3 Point Podcast Prep Preview. We always look forward to your outlook of the season before it all begins. Before we sign off, tell our listeners best spot to check you out.
Yeah, you can definitely check me out. Stories on LSJ.com, as you said. And I'm on Twitter at Brian, BRIAN _ Calloway, CALLOWAY. Thanks, guys, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Thanks for the time. We'll be back with a little further wrap up here on our prep spotlight. But first, this from Capital Sports Fieldhouse.